Despite being one of the biggest media franchises in history, there's been a lot of solid Star Wars games that flew directly under the radar upon release. When you think of Star Wars games, you probably think of Battlefront, Jedi Fallen Order, or Republic Commando, but what about the rest? Well, I've got you covered. Today we're going to be checking out some of the most underrated, underappreciated, and forgotten Star Wars games ever released. You let me know which of these you've actually played. Drop a like, make sure you're following the page. We start off with Star Wars The Clone Wars 2002. I know, that's a generic title, but the game is actually unique. It actually is a vehicular combat game that takes place during after Episode 2. Kicks off with the Battle of Geonosis, or Geonosis, and then goes into various battles and events that took place between Episodes 2 and 3. Now, granted, these are all non-canon now, but they're still pretty awesome. Throughout the game, you pilot various ships, vehicles in the Republic's arsenal as you do battle with the Separatists on a whole bunch of different planets. There's a few missions where you control Anakin and Mace, and it adds even more fan service to the mix. Star Wars The Clone Wars got good reviews and sold well when it was released for the GameCube, the PS2, and the Xbox, but due to it not being canon anymore, it was never really preserved, so it's actually hard to play. You can find emulated versions online if you want to give it a try, which I highly recommend. It's a really awesome game. Next up is Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2, 2010. It was one of the most disappointing sequels of its time, so you might be surprised to see it on the list. Now, I don't think The Force Unleashed 2 is super amazing. I do think it was treated too harshly. It is a much more linear game than the previous title, but the combat is actually more refined. Instead of being an action-adventure game like the first one, the sequel is more of a hack-and-slash that really lets you go nuts with Starkiller's insane power. The story, it's pretty limp, it's very short, but the gameplay is fun. I definitely don't think the game was worth the full $60 on launch day, but now in 2021, you can get it for less than $10, which is a much more appropriate price tag. So, if you want a ridiculous power fantasy in the Star Wars universe, The Force Unleashed 2 has you covered. It's not going to change your life, but it's good for a few hours. Next up, Star Wars Obi-Wan 2001. Who else is excited for the Obi-Wan Disney Plus show? Star Wars Obi-Wan was an Xbox exclusive, of course, had you played as Obi-Wan Kenobi in his younger years. Now, the story took place a few weeks before Episode 1 and had you carry out various Jedi missions throughout the Star Wars prequels. We've heard a lot from the Jedi Council, but we didn't see them in action. This game does a great job of filling in those gaps and showing us some of the Jedi Council and how they operated before Palpatine started screwing everything up. You go on various missions on a handful of planets, you try to track down various criminal organizations, and eventually you start playing through the events of Episode 1 as well, all concluding with a boss fight with Darth Maul. It was actually a good expansion of the young Obi-Wan story. It helped flesh out the world in the weeks before Episode 1 began. At number 7, Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds 2001. Now, with how large-scale the conflicts of Star Wars are, you would think we'd have more strategy-based games, but we didn't. Back in the day, Star Wars strategy games were much more common, and one of the most underrated examples was Galactic Battlegrounds, which was an RTS released for the PC in 2001. The game jumps around both the original and prequel trilogy, and there was even a whole expansion set during the Clone Wars. It's very similar to Age of Empires, which shouldn't be too shocking since it's built on the same engine. You start the mission with a command center and limited manpower, at which point you have to search for resources and eventually expand your forces and prepare for large-scale warfare. It's fun. If you like strategy games and you like Star Wars, this guy's you covered. Next up, Racer. Let's do a racing game. Star Wars Racer Arcade 2000. 21 years ago. That's crazy. There have been a lot of Star Wars arcade games, but Racer Arcade, I think it's the best. It's a racing game based on the pod racing scenes from The Phantom Menace, and as much as people hated the movie, most people will agree that pod racing is cool. It was a very detailed game. It featured a pod racer cockpit, you could sit in it, and plenty of buttons for you to push during the race, which kind of made it to walk the line between an arcade racer and an actual pod race simulator. It was released in 2000. Quickly became one of the most successful arcade cabinets in the world, and you probably won't have to look very far if you have an arcade, if that's still a thing, to find one. I mean, once they open back up, if that's still a thing, go pod race, if it's still a thing. I don't know. At number 5, Star Wars Bounty Hunter 2002. This game has gotten some attention in recent months thanks to the popularity of The Mandalorian. It is a third-person action game from 2002, released for the PS2 and the GameCube. It takes place in between Episodes 1 and 2, and has you playing as Jango Fett carrying out various missions from different bosses. Now, we never really got to see Jango being a beast in the movie, so getting a whole game based on his career as a bounty hunter, that's a win. You can pretty much use anything in Jango's arsenal, his jetpack, his rockets, even his flamethrower. The game's story also heavily fleshes out Count Dooku's involvement with the events of episodes 2 and 3, which I'm not really sure if that's canon anymore. I doubt it, but yeah. Star Wars Bounty Hunter is a great game. It makes me really excited for the future of Bounty Hunter-themed games because, let's be real, we all know the Mandalorian video game is coming. Disney would be crazy to not capitalize on the show with a video game, and hopefully it's similar to this one. At number 4, Star Wars Starfighter 2001. Released for the PS2, the Xbox, and the PC. It's a vehicular combat game based on the events of Episode 1, and while I know that's not everybody's favorite Star Wars movie, actually probably nobody's, but it did have some awesome fight scenes, and that's what the game takes full advantage of. You can control a few ships in a handful of different scenarios, all leading back to the climactic battle of Naboo. It was a lot of fun to pilot these ships, and the controls were surprisingly detailed for a game associated with a movie like The Phantom Menace. It was successful enough to get an arcade cabinet a few years later, and it was even ported to the PS3 in 2015. If you have a soft spot for the Episode 1 action scenes, you'll like this one. At number 3, Star Wars Trilogy Arcade, 1998. How far back can we go? This is one of the best Star Wars arcades ever. It was released in 98. It was one of the coolest experiences you could ever have with an arcade cabinet. It was a rail shooter with a handful of levels that took you through pivotal moments in the original trilogy. You could fly X-Wings around the Death Star. You could fly snowspeeders in the Battle of Hoth. You could drive a speeder bike on Endor. You could even have a showdown with Darth Vader. Star Wars Trilogy Arcade was an awesome game, and it aged actually pretty well. I know, it's a rail shooter, but the graphics and spectacle are what put it above many other games in the genre. The game is awesome, and if you can somehow track down a cabinet in your area, go give it a try. Once again, if arcades are still a thing. At number 2, Star Wars Galaxies 2003. There's so many Star Wars games. The Old Republic is the main Star Wars MMO on the market right now, but back in the day, we had Star Wars Galaxies. Developed by Sony Online Entertainment, it launched for the PC in 2003. It had you make a custom character, venture around the galaxy, complete jobs, level up, engage with other players. The game was set in between episodes 4 and 5, which made it feel much more engaging than the Old Republic, which is set long before the events of the movies. But, speaking of the Old Republic, you can thank that game for being what killed this game. Just 5 days before the Old Republic launched, servers for the Galaxies were shut down in an attempt to get people to convert to the new one. So, if you played this game back in the day, you know it was very different from what we have now, and a lot of people missed that. There have even been a handful of fan projects to revive Star Wars Galaxies, some successful, some not. Hopefully, one day we get an official relaunch of the game because I know there's people that would enjoy it. But at number 1 today, Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith 2005. Direct movie tie-in games are usually crap, but weirdly enough, the Revenge of the Sith game was one of the best Star Wars games ever made. I'm serious. Released in 2005 for the PS2 and the Xbox. It had you controlling both Anakin and Obi-Wan through the events of the movie, completing various missions and watching Anakin's descent to the dark side. You could use the XP to level up various attacks, abilities, and it all concludes with the massive showdown between Master and Apprentice. Plus, there's even an alternate ending where Anakin kills Obi-Wan. Seriously, spoiler alert. And the Emperor, and he kills everybody. He becomes the sole ruler of the galaxy. The Revenge of the Sith game is awesome. It's definitely the best direct movie adaptation in the Star Wars franchise. If you haven't played the game, fire up an emulator, give it a go. Because it's one of the best Star Wars games to come from the prequel era. And if you ask me, and you made it all the way to the end of the video, it's the most underrated Star Wars game of all time. Let me know one Star Wars game that didn't make the list that I need to go try, and I'll see you soon.